welcome to Jhart Modelworks. The body's been giving me some fits, so we're moving on to the engine, and there's a lot to be done. Welcome to my workbench. Let's get started.
Alright guys, let's get some business out of the way real quick. This video has a sponsor, and that sponsor is ProTech. Charlie from ProTech Model Parts reached out to me during one of the Hakasuka build videos and was like, hey, if I send you some stuff, would you be willing to show it on your channel? And I absolutely jumped at it. I said, absolutely. You guys know I use ProTech stuff all the time. On the truck build, I used all sorts of like braided line, air cleaners, photo etch bolts. All my builds get photo etch bolts on my license plates. The stuff is the Rolls Royce of aftermarket car parts. This is some of the most realistic braided line you're ever going to see. This is some of the larger stuff. This is Tamiya. There is no comparison at all. He sent us some braided line. Since it's an ignition coil, it comes with some boot material. Some of his spark plug wire. The stuff is fantastic. This is my box of 30 gauge, and that stuff is much thinner than my 30 gauge wire. If you guys ever use these photo etch wire looms, you know you can sometimes have trouble getting your wire to go through here. This stuff goes through it like it's no problem. Sent us some boot material to go with the wire. Sent us one of these pre-drilled ignition. Well, it's not really pre-drilled. It's got notches in it, so when you're drilling, your bit doesn't wobble around. Makes it much easier to drill. I typically stay away from aftermarket distributors because they're usually bigger than the kit ones, and they have to be. I mean, it's just the nature of you having to drill. They've got to be bigger. This is not much bigger. I'll show you when we get to that part of the engine build. And he sent us one of these fantastic air cleaners. This is the big version of the ones that I used on the truck build. These are the Edelbrock style. I absolutely love these things. They come with these little wing nuts. There's some material. It's basically just paper with some lines on it, but it looks the part when you get it in here. Just fantastic stuff. This is a product I use on a regular basis. Now, Charlie only ships to the US, and he only takes checks or money orders. I buy my stuff from Ted's Modeling Marketplace because I use credit cards for everything. But this is like my box of goodies, and we're talking ProTech T-fittings, more braided line, tons of braided line. I have all his sizes for braided lines, heater hoses. I mean, pretty much the whole box is ProTech. During the build, you're going to see me use this stuff. I'm going to show you how I use it, give you some tips, and all sorts of good stuff. But thanks to Charlie for sending some stuff out to us. So let's get to work.
We've cut all the parts off the sprue, and now we're going to glue together the engine block so we can spray it all at once. As usual, I'll probably be off camera a lot. My eyes aren't what they used to be, so I tend to pull the parts too close to me and get them out of frame, or I lean in and my head gets in the shot. Now the exhaust headers have a bunch of excess material in between all the individual pipes. I've already cleaned out some of it. We're going to go ahead and do this last one here real quick on camera. Now working with a hobby knife like this right by your fingers, it is entirely too easy to slip and have a really bad day. So if you're doing this, be extremely careful and just take out small bits at a time. Don't try to get it all at once. You see here I'm just working out small little layers. And then when I'm done, I'm going to smooth it all out with a round metal file. Pretty much the entire video is going to be at double speed. I apologize, I know it's not the best for viewing, but if I didn't speed this video up, we'd be looking at an hour to an hour and a half long video. So if you're doing work like this, please take your time and be careful. completely off camera again. I lined the headers up on the engine block and used a marker to mark out where the spark plug holes should be drilled, and now I'm just drilling them out to fit the Protect spark plug wire. So the valve covers are in kit chrome, and where some of the mount points are is a little problematic. So I'm going to go ahead and strip them with bleach. But before we do, we're going to make some alterations. I'm using my display nippers. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the oil breathers, which aren't very cleanly molded, as well as the oil fill cap. Then I'm going to take my sander, I'm going to sand everything smooth, but I'm not sanding the sides. I still want the profile for where the breathers are on the side of the valve cover. Once I have everything smoothed out, I'm going to go ahead and drill holes in the area where the oil breathers go. You all know I love my exotics. I love some Ferraris and Lamborghinis, but these older cars really allow you to go all out on modifications in a way you just cannot do on the newer cars, especially when the entire engine bay is covered with giant plastic engine covers. For this build, I want to go all out, especially in the engine bay. I've had a set of these Protect oil breathers in my stash for months now, and this seems like the perfect build for them. Yep, that's gonna do nicely. The oil filler cap was a little more than a poorly formed lump in the plastic, which is why I cut it off and sanded it flat. I'm going to replace it with a photo etch oil cap from Small Great Details, but I don't want to just glue it on. I'm cutting off a tiny sliver of 2mm plastic rod and gluing it to the surface. This will lift the cap up off the valve cover surface slightly and add just a little bit of depth to the detail. I glued it on with some Tamiya Extra Thin, and then once it had dried, I went ahead and sanded it down. I don't want it to stick out too much, so I sanded it so that it just comes slightly up off the surface. I'm going to take the oil breather out, and then it's into the bleach. Reference photos show there should be an oil drain plug on an indention on the side of the oil pan next to the oil filter. This kit doesn't even have the usual lump for one. Using a metal file, we carved out the indention. Once painted, we used a Protect 0.4-inch photo etch bolt for the plug. I don't use this size very often, but it's perfect for these drain plugs. Once attached, we applied a little bit of Tamiya panel liner for some depth and grime around the plug. One of the things Charlie sent me is this gorgeous 14-inch Edelbrock air cleaner. Now you do have to cut the filter material to fit, but that's okay because he gives you enough material to do the air filter twice. So if you mess up the first time, you have a second chance. So you can use Elmer's white glue. I'm going to go ahead and use some super glue. Whatever glue you use, the trick is to get it super thin so that it doesn't soak through the paper. If you've cut it to fit right, you can just press the material in between the top and the bottom, and it should slide right in. Just apply tiny little bits of glue all the way around and get everything glued in place. Then trim it off and glue down the end. Once the filter material is in place, all that's left is to place the photo etch wing nut on top. There's a piece of tape on top of the photo etch which makes it a little hard to get out of the packaging, so try not to ping them off into space. Just put the tiniest drop of super glue on top and carefully place the nut. With everything painted, it's time to start putting things together. Now I know the engine is supposed to be Chevy engine orange, but I don't like it, especially with the colors and the build that I have in mind. So while looking around, I saw brand new blueprinted 396 Chevy engines in gloss black and knew that was the color to go with. We're going to go ahead and glue on our heads, which I did in LP48 Sparkling Silver. And these are keyed, so they only go on one way. The intake manifold is a little tricky. It doesn't really want to sit right. You could open the holes up a little bit more. I just didn't. And then we're going to add in our carburetor. Now, when test fitting, the air cleaner doesn't fit right under the hood. So I ended up having to fix it by sanding down the carburetor and cutting the air cleaner pretty much in half. However, I also added in a 2mm magnet to both parts. This allows me to take the air cleaner on and off at will, which is actually very handy because you don't have to worry about breaking off the air cleaner when you push the engine in place. The valve covers are electric blue candy over chrome, and they are gorgeous. They're also keyed to prevent from gluing them to the wrong sides. I added some of the 0.02-inch photo etch bolts from ProTech for some great detail, but thinking back, they would have sat nicer if I had shaved off the original bolt nubs. We're going to add in our oil filler cap from Small Great Details. This, I think, is a really nice touch. It's much cleaner, much more defined, and gives a lot of extra realism. Just kind of put a drop of super glue on that piece of styrene I added. And using our blue tack, just pick up the photo etch and carefully drop it into place. What do you guys think? Next, we're going to add in the oil breathers. We're just going to put a tiny bit of glue inside the hole we drilled. Also going to put a tiny bit on the bottom of the oil breather itself. And then just slide them into place. Get the little snug. Add one in for the other side. And that looks much better than the kit lumps. Next, we're going to add on the oil filter, which the kit comes with. And here's the water pump. our starter. Just getting lazy and just dipping it straight into the glue. Bad form. Next, we're going to add on our exhaust headers. I sprayed them in Mr. Color's Super Titanium 2. I then sprayed them with Alclad Hot Metal Sepia. But for me, Alclad's Hot Metal Sepia always comes out shiny. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Everyone else sprays Alclad's Hot Metals. They come out nice and flat. For me, it always comes out wet. I just sprayed them with some Tamiya Flat Clear and fixed them. On the back of the braided line packages, Charlie adds a chart with a list of the sizes and their 1-to-1 equivalencies in 1/24th and 1/25th scale. So if you know the line that you're replicating, that's pretty helpful. We're going to use the .25 line to run a fuel line from the carburetor to the fuel pump. Charlie sells fittings for all of his line sizes, but I didn't think to ask for any, and Ted's was out of stock. So I just drilled a hole in the side of the carburetor to fit the whole braided line. This way I don't have to worry about the ends fraying. While talking to him, Charlie suggested using Future as glue for the braided line to prevent fraying as well, as it will soak into the braiding and hold everything in place. We did a little test fitting and made some bends, and finally we drilled the bottom of the fuel pump, and I glued the line in place with some CA glue as I don't have any Future. Next we're going to use Protex distributor and plug wires. The distributor comes with the aluminum base, a resin cap, and some boot material. Now you don't usually do aftermarket distributors. They're usually way too big for scale, but this one really isn't much larger than the kit distributor. The first thing we want to do is sand off any flash and then sand the bottom of the resin cap so that it will sit flush on the metal base. I then stuck mine to the bottom of the Altoid tin with some double-sided sticky tape and drilled out the holes. The cap has 9 indents in it, which keep your drill bit from sliding around and wandering, so you get good, evenly spaced holes for your wires. Autofocus was messing up while I was drilling the holes, so I set the camera to manual and then forgot to set it back. I do figure it out and fix it here in a second. We mixed up some Tamiya Pure Red and NATO Brown and painted the resin cap and then glued it onto the metal base. The post for this distributor is larger than the kit part, so I did have to drill out the hole a bit in the intake manifold, but it really wasn't that bad. I then did a test measure of some plug wire that was just a little bit longer than the longest run and replicated it 8 more times. I didn't feel like doing the 90-degree boots, so I just cut off some very small pieces of boot material and slid it over the wire. I then glued the plug wire into the distributor, added a touch more glue to the end, and slid the boot material down to the distributor for a perfect fit. Do that 8 more times, and that is the cleanest distributor I have ever made. If you know the firing order, you can do these in the correct order. And with this clean of a distributor, I really should have. But instead I was lazy, and I just split the plugs 4 on each side, and then added some photo etch plug looms. This plug wire goes on these photo etch plug looms so easy. I am going to rant a little bit. Gravity is a thing. Unfortunately for us, it doesn't work in scale the way it would on real plug wires, so we need to help it out. All too often you see wiring jobs where the plug wires come out in this huge plume of wire that shoots out over the air cleaner and then runs straight to the plugs like spider legs. If you're taking the time to add this detail, go ahead and do it right. Bend the wires down, push it into the low spots, and run it along the engine, run it up and over the valve covers. It will look so much better. Alright, rant is over. Charlie also sent us some of his plug boots. In my opinion, they're just a little long for 1/25th scale, so I cut them down to about 3/4 of their original length. I then slid them over the plug wire. They're a perfect fit, and they slide on really easy if you aren't too blind to see the hole. And I then glued the plug wire into the engine block and slid the boot into place. Seven more of these, and we're done. I added a few more 2-hole wire looms in places for a really clean wire management look. Now that our plug wire is in place, we're going to add a dipstick. We're going to take some 30 gauge wire, we're going to strip the end and curl it to make a handle. Then we're going to pull the bottom of that wire through the space between the engine block and the headers. Once we have it pulled to the right length, we're just going to add some glue, and I'm going to tuck it back behind the starter where you can't see it. Reference photos show a 90-degree hose running from the intake manifold to the water pump. We're going to add that in with some Protec heater hose. We'll just drill out the holes and then glue the line in place. I picked up a turned aluminum alternator from Mr. Model along with a pulley set. This thing is really cool. The body and the pulley are turned aluminum, and it comes with photo etch for the brackets and other parts. We'll put some tape behind the photo etch parts so that when we cut them off, they don't fly off into Neverland. And we'll just cut these off. Now the pulley is supposed to fit through the photo etch parts, but it's just a little bit too big, so I opened them up a little bit with a metal file. There we go. Now we're going to drop just a little bit of super glue on the end here. And we're going to carefully fit it into the body of the alternator. That looks cool. Now we're going to cut off the photo etch for the mounting bracket. And we'll glue that to our alternator. Now we did a little bit of bending off camera to line everything up with the new pulleys. And we're just going to press it home with a little super glue. Kind of a tight fit, so I end up using a toothpick to kind of hold it in place till the glue set. And now we're just going to add our belts. Put a little bit of glue on the bottom because that's where it's least likely to be seen. It's going to let this rubber, it's kind of a really thin hose. I wished it would have been something flat, more like a belt, but this is what they gave me in the pulley set. I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to each one of the pulleys. And then I'll cut it to fit at the bottom. And glue the last bit into place so that it lines up with the other end. The pulley set is really nice. It's all turned aluminum with this rubber material for the belt. And a lot of work went into assembling it and getting things to line up. As it's my first time using a pulley set and the pulleys don't match the original kit parts. So I did have to drill a hole for one of the pulleys and make spacers for some other parts. It's really a shame. It was a lot of work and the battery died on my phone. One of the customizations I had to do was I added a spacer to the fan. Now, because of the way I glued it and the way the fan's made and the fact that I didn't put any glue on the fan itself, the fan actually ends up spinning when it's done. So we're just going to press that fan into its place. And the way I've spaced it, the fan still fits in the fan shroud when I did my dry fitting. And that's our engine. All done. I'm really happy with this one. I think this one turned out great. I really like that ProTech distributor. And the spark plug wire was really easy to work with. The magnet was a really nice touch. I don't have to worry about breaking off the air cleaner, and it makes it easier when I go to push the engine down onto the frame. Speaking of fitting into the chassis, I'm not going to glue it in just yet because there's some other parts that need to go into place, but we are going to dry fit it just to get a look. So there's the frame. Again, just take that air cleaner off and we can just press it firmly down into the frame mounts. And just pop it right back on. And the frame sits up into the chassis. Here it is, all mated up together, and again, I have to say I'm very happy with how this is turning out. I really like the contrast between the blue and the yellow and gold accents, and black was definitely the right choice for the block. And all the little accents added in, especially all the stuff from ProTech, really helps to set this engine off. So once again, a huge thanks to our sponsor, Charlie from ProTech. We still have the ignition coil to install, but we're going to do that as part of the engine bay video. I will be breaking it up again as there was so much with the engine, and because you can't really work the engine bay until the chassis is all mated up and the firewall is in, and you can't put the engine in the chassis until the steering shaft is in, and you can't put the firewall in until the pedals are in for the interior, so the engine bay will be after the interior work. For right now, we're going to keep working at the body and the chassis and suspension work. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button.
Also, feel free to leave comments, feedback, critique, or anything else in the comment section below. I enjoy interacting with all my viewers in the comment section and try to reply to all the comments I receive. If you want to catch future videos, please consider subscribing to my channel and make sure you click the bell notification icon so you can be notified when I upload new videos. As always, thank you for watching, keep modeling, and have a great day.